Hello everybody, my name is Griffin, talking to you guys from Rishi Outpost, and today I'll be talking about why Star Wars The Clone Wars is an absolute masterpiece. So to begin with, I just want to say that I consider myself to be a part of the Clone Wars generation of Star Wars fans. This show absolutely defines my Star Wars fandom. I was perfect age for the show when it came out, and seeing the movie in theaters was my first exposure to Star Wars, and I've been hooked ever since. Now that Season 7 has been released and the show is completed, kind of, we can finally look back on it in its entirety. So I thought this would be a good time to talk about why the show is just so great. To start off with, the improvement in the animation that we can see in the show between Season 1 and Season 7 is astounding. While the animation from early on in the show wasn't the best, I never have found its quality distracting from the episodes from that period. And by the end of the show, especially in Season 7, the animation and overall look are just absolutely phenomenal. In some shots, ships and planets look as real as they do on the big screen. And while the characters still look animated to fit the style of their show, their facial expressions are able to perfectly convey the emotions, and they look wonderful. Another reason the Clone Wars looks so good is the generous budget allowed it to have tons of stuff on screen at the same time, which allowed for epic battles and fully realized environments and backgrounds. Sometimes animated shows bite off more than they can chew because of budget restraints, and their sets and scripts don't seem to be fully realized. That is never a problem in the Clone Wars. In addition to the mostly great visuals, the score of the Clone Wars also added a lot to the show. It really took Star Wars music in a different direction compared to the live-action films, and this ultimately serves the show very well. A particularly noticeable aspect of the music in Clone Wars was the rock-inspired, fast-paced music that plays during many of the action sequences. It's a pretty dramatic departure from traditional Star Wars scores, but I think it works really well. This is accompanied by some more pieces such as Ahsoka's theme that are more like what we're used to hearing from Star Wars music, and these are great too. Overall, the score of the Clone Wars was really great and added a ton to the atmosphere and emotions of the show. On top of the solid score and visuals, the voice actors who worked on the Clone Wars really helped bring the characters of the show to life. Matt Lanter as Anakin Skywalker, Ashley Eckstein as Ahsoka Tano, and James Arnold Taylor as Obi-Wan Kenobi all do a fantastic job with their characters throughout the show. While these, and indeed all of the voice actors on the Clone Wars, did a great job, it's hard to top Dee Bradley Baker, the one lone man who voiced every single clone in the Clone Wars, and really did manage to make each and every one sound like a different character, which was truly an incredible feat. The characters that the animators and voice actors brought to life in the Clone Wars are spectacular. The show manages to further flesh out both major characters from the films, such as Anakin and Obi-Wan, as well as expand upon more minor characters from the films, such as Count Dooku and General Grievous. In addition to further exploring and expanding old characters from the movies, it also introduces great new characters like Ahsoka Tano, Captain Rex, and Cad Bane. It even resurrects Darth Maul from the movies and gives the character new life, both literally and metaphorically. I could talk for hours about the character development in this show, but for now, I'm just going to talk about a couple of my favorites. Since the Clone Wars jumps back and forth between many different storylines and characters, it's hard to say there really is a single main character in the show. But if there is one, it certainly would have to be Ahsoka Tano. In many ways, we see a lot of what happens in the show through her eyes. She starts off as an annoying 14-year-old kid, but eventually grows into a really cool character. She matures a lot during the show, and her journey progresses from naive Jedi Padawan to a more mature student to someone who, by the end of the show, sees the faults of the Jedi and leaves the Order and tries to help the galaxy in her own way. Growing up with her, as many who were kids when the show came out, was a particularly cool experience. Another key character-based accomplishment of this show is how it humanizes the clones. Even though they all share the same genetic makeup, they are each individuals with different personalities, and in some cases have very different desires and journeys that they embark on. The close relationships that many of the clones had with many of the Jedi is a particular focus of the show, and it ultimately works to make their eventual betrayal of the Jedi during Order 66 even more heartbreaking. The main clone character in the show is, of course, Captain Rex, and through his eyes we really get to see the point of view of the clones. We see their mixed feelings about the war, which is responsible for their existence, and yet they don't really know what their stake in it actually is, beyond having to serve their duty. Seeing Rex progress through the war and ultimately walking away from the army after Order 66 was a really satisfying journey. Anakin Skywalker is, of course, a key character in the Clone Wars, and this show is hands down my favorite portrayal of him before he turns to the dark side in Revenge of the Sith. He has a lot more charisma in this show than he does in the prequel trilogy, and I think his complexities are explored really well here. The show is able to convince me both that Anakin really is a good guy, and that he really does have the potential to become a bad guy. This show had a lot more time than the prequel trilogy did, and a decent chunk of that time went into really fleshing out Anakin's journey as he drifts closer and closer to the dark side. The last character I want to talk about in this video is Maul. His return in the Clone Wars is one of the most pivotal parts of the show. While the plausibility of his survival is, well, questionable, in my opinion, he is written so well and his story is so interesting that it makes me want to just go along with the fact that he survived his injuries from the Phantom Menace. In general, he's a much more well-developed character in this show than in the Phantom Menace, and his attempts to seize power in the galaxy and his conflicts with his many enemies are fascinating to watch. The way in which all these different characters and stories were balanced in this show was part of what made it great. People often refer to the Clone Wars as an anthology series, which is partially true, although the arcs build on each other over time and there's a pretty rational progression as time goes on. So I don't really think of it as a true anthology series where each episode or arc would really totally stand on its own. But the way these different characters and plot threads were weaved together to tell the story of the show was truly impressive. To change gears a little bit, I want to talk about the action in the Clone Wars. Action has always been an important part of Star Wars, and the Clone Wars take Star Wars action to new heights. We see battles in brand new environments that haven't been seen on screen in Star Wars ever before, as well as space battles and ground battles that invoke those seen in the theatrical films while still being unique in their own way. The show also has a number of great lightsaber battles that even rival some of those in the movies. One of the most unique battles from the Clone Wars was the Battle of Mon Calamari, which was fought almost entirely underwater. The three-dimensional all-infantry battle was a really unique take on action in Star Wars, and was a lot of fun to see. Another really unique battle in the show is the Battle of Dathomir, where we see General Grievous lead the droid army against the Night Sisters on Dathomir. Seeing the witch's magic go against the technology of the droids on the shadowy world was really something special, as was the duel Grievous and Ventress had at the end. Another amazing battle from the Clone Wars was the second Battle of Geonosis, where the Jedi and clones have to subdue the Geonosian and droid army there again after they apparently lost control of the planet after Attack of the Clones. The last big ground battle I want to talk about is of course the Battle of Umbara, where the clone troops have to fight through the darkened planet against the native militia, who has an array of unique weapons and equipment. This battle is massive and it takes some very dark turns as it progresses. The space battles in the show are also really cool. There's the Battle of Ryloth, where Anakin and Ahsoka go to great lengths to break the Separatist blockade of the planet, as well as the Battle of Solist, where Obi-Wan and Anakin face off against Ventress's fleet, and where the assassin is betrayed by Dooku. There are several spectacular lightsaber battles in the show as well. My favorite one is in Season 5, where Darth Sidious goes to Mandalore to confront Maul and Savage Opress, capturing the former and killing the latter in an epic showdown between villains. Another one of the best duels in the show is the fight between Ahsoka Tano and Maul on Mandalore in the final season. Maul is desperate not to be captured, and Ahsoka is determined to end his rule on Mandalore. The tension between the two is heightened as Maul believes Anakin is about to go to the dark side and join Sidious, and Ahsoka wants to defend him. The motion capture in this fight is amazing, and they even brought Ray Park himself to do motion capture for Maul in the show. All in all, the action in the Clone Wars is incredible. The last topic I want to touch on is how the Clone Wars affects the lore of the Star Wars universe. This is where I will voice my one and only complaint about this show, which is that it often contradicts, or at least appears to contradict, the expanded universe, now Legends, multiple times. I do think there are some explanations for some of these problems, and I'll cover those at a later date. Contradictions with the EU aside, however, the Clone Wars expanded on the lore of Star Wars in a massive way. We get to see so many new planets and species, and we get to see previously existing ones further fleshed out or put on screen for the first time. We get to see species like the Toydarians in greater numbers, and we get to see their homeworld. We get to see the Umbaran homeworld and what many of its people look like. We just get to see so many locations and so many different alien species and cultures throughout this show. We also get to see some unique aspects of the universe that tie into the rest of the films, such as the buildup of planetary militias like the one on Onderon, which eventually will help form the early Rebel Alliance against the Empire. We see the struggle between the Republic and Separatists over the secret hyperspace coordinates called the Nexus Route, which is likely how General Grievous attacks Coruscant in Revenge of the Sith. And we learn a little bit more about the Jedi Master Sifo Dyas and how he was killed before the war. And we just get so many of these fun and interesting connections that enrich the universe and add layers to the films. The most significant contribution to the lore of Star Wars that the Clone Wars gives us is the last and perhaps most in-depth look at the nature of the Force that comes directly from George Lucas. This is mostly seen in the Mortis arc from Season 3 and Yoda's arc in Season 6. On Mortis, we learn more about Anakin Skywalker's place in the universe as the Chosen One and about what it means to have balance in the Force. In Yoda's arc, we learn a little bit more about how someone is able to manifest their consciousness after death. And this, in turn, sheds light into why we don't see the spirits of all the Jedi who died during the prequel trilogy. It's worth mentioning that all of this is done while still maintaining the sense of wonder that surrounds these mysterious concepts. Throughout its run, the Clone Wars expanded on the lore of the Star Wars universe spectacularly and did so on a scale that we had never seen before and will likely never see again. Well, that's all I have for you guys this time. Be sure to like and share this video, as well as to leave your thoughts about the Clone Wars or anything else in the comments below. Be sure to stay safe, and as always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.